The cosmos held its breath as Ambassador Zathari descended to the dusty surface of Kepler 442b. For centuries, his service to the Galactic Council had woven a tapestry of first contacts across the stars, encounters marked by caution, ceremony, and the delicate arithmetic of power. His azure skin, once vivid as a nebula, had been bleached pale by the sterile light of 1,000 diplomatic chambers, and the ridges of his forehead bore the silent weight of civilizations observed in their dawn and witnessed in their dusk. He was a scholar of protocols, a weaver of alliances, a curator of the Council's great and fragile peace. Yet nothing in his vast experience, not the crystalline logic of the Mechani, nor the psychic harmonies of the choir of Vex, could have prepared his soul for the quiet, earth-shattering revelation that awaited him in a place called New Haven. Like, subscribe, and share this story to journey deeper into the galaxy's best-kept and most terrifying secret. Comment below with your guess. What makes humanity so different? The settlement sprawled before him, a modest scar of metal and glass on the alien rock, breathing thin, manufactured air. It hummed with the benign industry of any young colony. Governor Chen greeted him with a flat-toothed smile and a handshake, a curiously intimate, potentially treacherous human custom. The tour was a masterpiece of mundane achievement. Hydroponic farms, singing with genetically tailored wheat, schools where children chanted mathematical theorems, factories 3D printing tools with efficient, cheerful clicks. Zathari's tablet filled with approving notes. Here was a species of admirable resilience, a promising candidate for the gentle, regulatory embrace of the Council. Their history was brief, a mere 50-year footnote on this world. Their numbers were modest. Their defenses, Chen assured him with a dismissive wave, were a small security force, a phrase that in Council lexicon translated to a harmless local constabulary. Then the sirens tore the sky. The sound was a physical violence, a scalpel of noise that lanced through Zathari's 4 auditory canals. In the communal dining hall, where moments before humans had been laughing over a meal called pizza, a transformation occurred, not into panic, but into a cold, focused fury. Governor Chen's affable face hardened into something geologic. Pirates, he stated, the word a flat condemnation. Through the panoramic window, Zathari saw them. A dozen scarred, predatory vessels, descending like carrion birds. The Crimson Fleet, raiders whose brutality was a dark legend on the Outer Rim. His diplomatic instincts flared. The Council fleet can be here in hours, he urged, already accessing his comm. Chen's response was a calm, quiet sentence into his wrist. Colonel Martinez. We have guests. Please keep things clean. What followed was not a battle. It was an autopsy performed at terminal velocity. From concealed bays, human craft ascended, not the blocky shield-dependent fighters of Council design, but sleek, angular things that moved with the vicious grace of raptors. The pirates lumbered, firing wildly. The humans struck. There was no ceremonial dancing at range, no patient attrition of shields. It was a series of precise, clinical excisions. Particle beams lanced out, not to disable, but to eviscerate, targeting reactor cores, propulsion manifolds, bridge modules. One after another, the pirate ships burst into silent, blossoming flowers of fire in the vacuum, or tore screaming through the atmosphere to impact the distant mesas in thunderous pyres. 17 minutes. A complete extermination. The final fugitive vessel, clawing desperately for the jump point, was sliced into molten confetti by a single pursuing fighter. "No survivors," reported Colonel Martinez's voice, cool as deep space, through Chen's device. Zathari's blood, not the planet's thin air, turned to ice. He offered a compliment, his voice strained. "Your pilots are exceedingly skilled." Chen watched the last flames die on the horizon. "They're good kids. Most flew in the military back on Earth. Standard training." "Standard?" Zathari echoed. "Oh, sure. These lads actually started in the regular infantry, cross-trained into air support later." Regular infantry. The phrase lodged in Zathari's mind like a shard of obsidian. The galaxy's most lethal starfighters were piloted by repurposed ground soldiers. Later, he met Colonel Martinez. She was compact. Her dark eyes holding the absolute stillness of a predator at rest. Her uniform was devoid of the braid and brilliance of council officers. It was the color of dust and shadow. "Apologies for the disruption, Ambassador," she said. "We prefer to keep the ugliness on the perimeter." Zathari probed, careful. "Your efficiency is remarkable. The Crimson Fleet is a notorious threat." "They were expecting farmers," she replied, with a shrug that dismissed an entire pirate armada. "They found something else." He learned their numbers. 500 active personnel, against the thousands the pirate horde would have carried. The arithmetic was not just improbable. It was an insult to reality. That night, Zathari's first report to the Council was a masterpiece of diplomatic understatement screaming with subtexts. Humanity's normal is our unthinkable. The next day peeled back another layer of the profound, unsettling truth. New Haven was not a settlement. It was a carnivore's jaw. Artfully concealed. Every plaza was a killing field, every corridor a funnel, every building a redoubt. The very architecture was a martial philosophy, cast in permacrete and polyglass. "Is this typical?" Zathari asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Standard colonial template," Chen affirmed, as if discussing sewage recycling. "Our history on Earth taught us to always build the door strong, because you never know what's knocking." The training exercise Zathari witnessed next was a chilling ballet of simulated death. Human soldiers moved through mock urban terrain as a single distributed consciousness. They communicated in blinks and gestures, flowed through doorways like water, and placed shots with impossible consistency. They were not just trained, they were engineered for conflict. "How long to achieve this cohesion?" Zathari asked Martinez. 4 months of basic. This unit's been together 2 years. 4 months. The Council's elite guards trained for 4 years to attain half the proficiency. But the true, soul-freezing horror came not on the battlefield, but over a shared meal. Among the easy laughter and camaraderie of off-duty soldiers, a young man joked about his drill sergeant on Earth. The old guy kept screaming that if we couldn't hack basic infantry training, we'd never make it into special forces. The table went quiet. The air thickened. "Special forces?" Zathari inquired. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Glances were exchanged, a silent conversation in a language he could not pass. "Elite units," one soldier finally said. His joviality vanished. "Different missions. We don't really see them." Later, walking alone under Kepler 442b's twin moons, Zathari's mind raced. If this is their regular, what zenith of controlled violence constitutes elite? What unspeakable threat requires a tier beyond this? His answer came not from his hosts, but from the cold, indifferent ether. His shuttle's sensitive array, left passively scanning, intercepted a fragmented, encrypted burst. A human transmission from light years away. Real situation is getting out of hand. Local authorities collapsed. Reinforcements. Better. Special Forces team ships at dawn. Should be wrapped in a week. Bruh. A pause. Then a voice laced with something akin to pity. Poor bastards. They have no idea what's coming. The transmission dissolved into static. Zathari stood in the dark, the words echoing in the vast, newly terrifying universe. Somewhere, in the quiet dark between stars, humanity was deploying its ultimate solution. And somewhere else, something or someone was blissfully, tragically unaware that its doom was not just coming, but was already en route, moving with the quiet, inexorable certainty of a law of physics. As his shuttle ascended from New Haven, the colony below, once again a picture of tranquil industry, Ambassador Tzvari understood the fundamental error of the Galactic Council. They had spent millennia measuring the claws of tigers and the venom of serpents, meticulously balancing known quantities of power. They had never considered the possibility of a species that did not merely possess claws, but had, from the moment it grasped a rock, dedicated its entire existence to the sacred, terrible science of sharpening them. His report would not be a recommendation. It would be a warning, carved on a tombstone that had not yet been needed. The galaxy had just met humanity. And the galaxy, Zathari feared with every fibre of his being, was hopelessly, desperately out of its depth. The great chamber of the Galactic Council, a sanctum of polished starlight and humming quantum silence, had witnessed the birth of treaties and the dissolution of empires. Yet, as Ambassador Thari's testimony echoed through its vaulted expanse, a new, more profound silence descended. A silence thick with the dust of shattered assumptions. Representatives from 100 worlds, beings of light and scale, of gas and crystal, listened, their multifaceted eyes wide, their tendrils stiff with apprehension. Zathari painted a picture not with broad strokes of alarm, but with the fine, terrifying brush of observed detail. The surgical butchery of the pirates, the fortress colony, the soldiers who treated war as a casual craft. In conclusion, Zathari's voice resonated with finality. I recommend humanity be granted full membership. And I simultaneously recommend we classify their martial capacity as a Tier 1 galactic security paradox. The chamber erupted. Voices clashed in a cacophony of fear and disbelief. The Jijinami delegate, Koraf, a mountain of emerald scales and cold, strategic intellect, rose, his tail lashing the air. Ambassador, in your considered view, could this humanity threaten the Council itself? Zathari met the reptilian gaze. He saw not an adversary, but a fellow logician, about to receive a devastating equation. Honorable Koraf, he said, each word a heavy stone dropped into still water. Based on my observations, humanity's regular military forces could likely pacify half the signatory worlds within this chamber, and they would consider it a moderate operational tempo. The uproar that followed was volcanic. Denials, demands for proof, calls for preemptive sanctions, a symphony of dread. But through the chaos, Zathari's sharp ears caught a whisper. A human whisper. From the liaison officer seated unobtrusively in the observer's gallery. She leaned to her aide, a ghost of a smile on her lips, and murmured, "Just wait until they find out about special forces." The Thari closed his eyes. The foundation of everything he knew had just dissolved. The council's response was not unified, but it was decisive in its anxiety. Committees spiraled into existence. Security protocols were rewritten, and General Korath, warrior scholar of the hegemony, proposed a solution born of his culture's brutal pragmatism. A test. Not a diplomatic exchange, but a controlled military crucible. The chosen anvil was Vega Prime, a lawless, bleeding wound of a world, its continents carved into fiefdoms by pirates, separatists, and mercenary syndicates. The plan was simple, elegant, and deliberately overwhelming. A joint operation. 500 of Korath's finest hegemony guards, warriors hatched and hardened for war, would be accompanied by a token human contingent. 50 soldiers. Korath's logic was a public calculation meant to reassure the council. If the humans were as formidable as Zafari claimed, 50 would be sufficient. If they were not, they would be a negligible, sacrificial variable. 2 weeks later, in the orbital command center above Vega Prime's bruised atmosphere, General Korath beheld the human complement. Captain Sarah Chen disembarked from her transport. A woman of unassuming stature, whose calm seemed to absorb the command deck's frantic energy rather than reflect it. Behind her, 50 Marines assembled their gear. Korath watched, his analytical mind recording everything. Their movements were devoid of wasted motion, a ballet of quiet efficiency. They checked weapons with the reverence of artisans, not the zeal of fanatics. "I have studied the reports of New Haven," Korath rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "An impressive debut." Captain Chen offered a slight shrug, a gesture Korath was beginning to recognize as humanity's dismissal of the extraordinary. "Routine border action, General. Nothing notable." In the strategy briefing, holograms glowed with enemy dispositions. Nearly 5,000 hardened combatants across 3 mutually hostile factions dug into fortified positions across an entire planet. Major Voss, the Council's intelligence officer, outlined the standard pacification doctrine: gradual encirclement, fortified forward bases, systematic clearing. Projected timeline, 6 to 8 months, Voss concluded. Captain Chen raised a hand. "Permission to speak, General." "Granted. 6 months seems inefficient. My Marines can have this planet compliant in 2 weeks. The silence in the room was absolute and freezing. Korath leaned forward. "Explain, Captain." Chen approached the hologram, her finger tracing enemy clusters. "They hate each other. We hit one, the others will cheer. We hit them fast, in sequence, faster than they can conceive of unity. If they do unite—" She paused, and in that pause, Korath felt a chill. "Then we adjust tactics and break them anyway." The next morning, Korath's guards began the laborious, precise work of establishing an impregnable base camp, a fortress from which to project power. It was textbook. It was wise. The humans scattered like shrapnel. Period. 5 teams of 10 Marines each vanished into Vega Prime's toxic jungles and sprawling urban wastes, establishing hidden observation posts in locations that seemed random to the point of insanity. When Korath questioned the dispersal over the comms, Chen's reply was calm, logical, and utterly alien. "Respectfully, General, "We're not here to defend. We're here to attack." The attacks began not with the thunder of artillery, but with the whisper of a scalpel. Team Alpha ghosted into a Red Claw pirate supply depot in the northern crags. Orbital sensors showed 10 tiny thermal signatures moving through 200 hostiles. There were no protracted firefights. There were sudden, simultaneous eruptions of violence at power generators, armories, and communication hubs. Then, silence. The 10 signatures vanished, leaving behind a depot of smoldering wreckage and bewildered, leaderless survivors. It was over in minutes. Team Beta severed a separatist comm network. Team Charlie turned a smuggler's weapons cache into a localized supernova. All within 12 hours. On the second day, the Red Claw responded, sending a battalion of blooded raiders to hunt down Team Alpha. They found them not hiding, but waiting, emplaced on high ground in a narrow canyon. The ensuing battle, watched in horrified real-time by Korath and his staff, was not a battle. It was a geometric proof of lethality. The Marines used the terrain as a force multiplier, their fire interlocking with impossible precision. The pirate battalion was not defeated. It was erased. Team Alpha suffered 0 casualties. They then looted the battlefield for usable materiel. "How?" Korath demanded of Chen when she reported in, his tactical computers screaming with statistical improbability. "Doctrine, sir." Her voice was flat, clean. "We train to be outnumbered. It simplifies the targeting priorities." By the third day, the impossible occurred. The rival factions, terrified of the unseen, uncatchable phantom killing them, formed a desperate alliance. 3,000 fighters, with armor and air support, began a coordinated march towards the last triangulated human position. They outnumbered the Marines 60-1. Korath's tactical mind saw disaster. He hailed Chen. "Captain, consolidate on my position. You cannot stand against that mass." "Negative, General." Chen's voice crackled, unperturbed. "We're exactly where we want to be." What followed was a masterpiece, woven not in days, but in the 3 days prior. The humans had not been hiding. They had been weaving. The advancing alliance rolled into a continent-sized kill zone. Bridges dissolved beneath them. Roads became corridors of hellfire. Every hillock spat precise, killing fire. The Marines fought not as 50 individuals, but as a single, distributed nervous system. They shattered command vehicles, sowed chaos, and moved constantly. A phantom enemy that was everywhere and nowhere. Korath witnessed the fundamental truth. Other species fought until exhaustion mandated rest. The humans escalated. Their coordination grew sharper, their attacks more brutal as the hours bled on. They drew strength from the chaos itself. In 4 days, it was over. The surviving enemies, those not vaporized in the firestorm, surrendered. Not to the mighty Hijiganami guard in their fortress, but specifically to the mud-stained, unassuming human Marines. The look in the prisoners' eyes was not defeat. It was a kind of shattered awe, the look of primitive beings who had glimpsed a fundamental law of the universe. Do not provoke humanity. In the echoing quiet of a shattered rebel stronghold, Korath found Captain Chen. "A question, Captain, directly." His voice was stripped of its customary rumble, reduced to bare inquiry. "Your unit, are you what your people call special forces?" Chen actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. "Sir, no. We're 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. Grunts. Colonial Security Detachment. Korath's secondary heart clenched. Grunts. Then he pressed, the question the stone in his throat. What are your special forces like? The laughter died. Chen's face settled into an expression of profound seriousness. I've never operated with them, General. Different mission set. But from the rumors, she chose her next words as one might handle live ordnance. We're trained to fight enemies. They're trained to fight wars. Wars that the rest of the universe doesn't even know are happening. Korath's report to the Council was a clinical, devastating document. Vega Prime was secure. Enemy casualties, over 90%. Human casualties, 0. The Higanami Guard, 500 of their best, had been magnificent spectators. As the human transport prepared to depart, Captain Chen offered a final courtesy. Thank you for the joint op, General. My Marines appreciated observing your people's tactical approach. It's valuable to study different perspectives. Different perspectives. The phrase echoed in Korath's mind as the ship vanished into the starfield. The systematic disassembly of an army was to them a cultural exchange. Back in his orbital command center, the cold truth settled in his bones. He had used a planet as a laboratory, and the experiment had yielded an indisputable result. Humanity's normal was the galaxy's apocalyptic, and they possessed a higher tier, a classified echelon of soldier, for which the only descriptor was unspeakable. A priority transmission arrived from Council intelligence. A deep-range colony, Epsilon Ariadne, had gone silent. Distress beacon indicated non-standard hostile contact. The Council was mustering a battle group. The communication officer added a postscript, his voice thin. Sir, human channels are buzzing. They're not sending a fleet. They're dispatching a single Special Forces team. ETA 4 days. Korath stared at the star chart, at the blinking icon of Epsilon Ariadne. Somewhere out there was a threat so bizarre, so beyond the pale, that humanity's response was not an army, but a ghost. A single, silent team from their most shadowed roster. He turned to his officer, his command carrying the weight of a newfound and terrible understanding. Signal all Council assets. New standing order. Any vessel encountering human Special Forces operations is to withdraw to maximum safe distance. Observe only. Do not, under any circumstances, intervene. Sir, what constitutes maximum safe distance? Korath thought of 50 Marines turning a world to ash. He thought of warriors who fought wars hidden from reality itself. A different stellar system, he said, his voice hollow. Perhaps a different sector. We will define safe after we see what they leave in their wake. The orders went out, cascading through the Council's military networks, a warning born not of procedure, but of primal, dawning terror. The galaxy had just received its first lesson in human conventional warfare. Now, it was about to receive its first, and perhaps last, lesson in what humanity did when things got truly strange. And in the silent dark of his command chair, General Korath wondered if safe distance was a concept that even existed anymore. The void between galaxies is not empty. It is a cathedral of ancient cold and older whispers, where things that predate light nurse their incomprehensible hungers. For millennia, the civilizations of the Galactic Council spun their tales and treaties under a comforting, unspoken assumption that the deepest dark held only silence, or at most, myths. That assumption died screaming in the opening hours of what would become known as the Swarm War. In the Council's central command, a panopticon of light and data at the heart of Centauri Prime, Admiral Jaktar watched the strategic hologram bleed crimson. Systems were not just falling, they were being unmade. The Void Swarm, a legend so old it had calcified into allegory, had returned. It was a machine plague, a hive mind of fractal ships that consumed not just planets, but the very laws that held them together, using the raw material of reality to birth more of its nightmarish kind. The Council's combined fleets, the proud, polished armadas of 100 species, had met the advancing tide at the Cygnus Barrier. They had lasted 6 hours. "Status!" Jaktar commanded, his voice the only steady thing in a room vibrating with panic. Major Jens, his face ashen, gestured at the hologram. "The swarm is accelerating. They've bypassed every defensive line. At this rate, the core worlds have 18 days, maybe less. First Fleet is gone, Admiral. Second is in fragments. They don't just defeat us, they absorb our weapons, our strategies. They learn, and they evolve." On the main viewer, the final transmission from Admiral Kor played on a loop. His flagship's bridge was an inferno behind him. "Jaktar, they're not an enemy. They're an entropy. We need other options. Other options." The euphemism hung in the air, sour and final. It meant retreat, triage, the sacrifice of billions. It meant the end of their civilization. Jens cleared his throat, a small, desperate sound. "Sir, there is one potential asset, unconventional." Jaktar didn't need to hear the name. It had been the subject of fearful whispers, closed-door debates, and sleepless nights for months. The humans. Their capabilities are unorthodox. The Vega Prime report, the Epsilon Ariadne incident, which our observers still cannot fully explain. If any species operates outside the swarm's apparent adaptive parameters, contact Ambassador Mitchell, Jaktar ordered, the words tasting of ash and surrender. Request an immediate audience, not as a counsel to a member, but as a drowning man to a lifeguard. When Ambassador Sarah Mitchell entered the operations center, she did not flinch at the panorama of despair. She studied the carnage on the displays with the focused intensity of a physician assessing a critical wound. "Admiral," she said, her tone stripped of diplomatic cadence, "you require assistance." "We require a miracle, Ambassador. Our fleets are gone. This thing eats conventional warfare for breakfast. Can your people do anything?" Mitchell was silent for a long moment, her eyes tracing the swarm's advance. "Admiral," she said finally, "this is not a task for our regular forces. The Void Swarm exists in a state of perpetual ontological violation. It operates on logic planes our standard military isn't tooled to perceive." A cold trickle of dread traced Jaktar's spine. "Then what do you propose?" "This," Mitchell said, the word absolute, "requires special forces." There it was, the ghost in the machine, the solution that was also a profound, terrifying mystery. "Can you contact them?" Jaktar asked. "They're already en route," Mitchell replied, and the sheer, casual certainty of it stole the breath from the room. "Our deep-range monitors flagged the swarm's incursion months ago. Counter-swarm protocols were activated. Teams have been prepping. You knew and said nothing." "We weren't certain of the vector until recently. And frankly, Admiral, she met his gaze, her own unwavering. What would you have done with the information? Built bigger guns? The swarm consumes bigger guns. This fight isn't about payload. It's about perspective. 2 days later, the human response arrived. Admiral Jacta, expecting a vast armada, a show of terrifying force, watched on sensors as 12 ships slipped into the edge of Council space. They were wrong. They were sleek, organic shapes that seemed to blur at the edges, their geometry subtly offensive to the eye. They emitted no standard transponder codes, no energy signatures that Council science could categorize. They were less ships, and more like concepts given momentary, predatory form. "They're hailing us, sir," Jens reported, then frowned. "Not hailing. The message is just here." It appeared on Jactar's private terminal, bypassing every layer of encryption, written in clean, standard glyphs. "Council Command. This is Special Forces Command. Civilian evacuation appreciated. Military operations commence in 6 hours. Maintain minimum distance. 5 light-years from Swarm Nexus. Observation only. Trust the protocol. 5 light-years. A distance for astronomers, not tacticians." Before Jactar could formulate a bewildered response, a second message appeared. "If you are reading this, you are attempting to reply. Do not. Comms blackout is active. Updates will follow. Do not interfere. We have done this before." The Swarm was a mythological end-times event. And humanity had a protocol. 6 hours later, to the second, the 12 human vessels arrowed into the heart of the Swarm. They did not attack. They were absorbed. The vast, churning cloud of alien machinery swallowed them whole. For 12 agonizing hours, there was nothing. No explosions, no energy spikes. Just the Swarm, continuing its slow, cancerous expansion. Then the impossible began. The perfect, horrific symmetry of the Swarm's movement fractured. Sections began to stutter, to move against each other. It was as if a single, vast consciousness was experiencing a stroke. Reports, clipped and bizarre, began to appear on Jactar's terminal. SF Team Alpha, infiltration successful. Neural logic nodes seeded with paradox engines, initiating cascade. SF Team Beta, swarm subconsciousness exhibiting recursive anxiety loops, amplifying. SF Team Gamma, primary hive interface located, commencing conversation. "Conversation?" Jens whispered. "They're talking to it." The reports grew more esoteric, more chilling. SF Team Epsilon, psychological operations at 78% effectiveness. Swarm intelligence experiencing concept analogous to dread. SF Team Zeta, swarm attempting to negotiate, translating terms of surrender. Jacta's mind reeled. They were not blasting the swarm apart. They were performing a cosmic-scale exorcism. They had hacked a hive mind, terrorized an emotionless machine intelligence, and were now dictating terms to a force of nature. 36 hours after infiltration, the swarm convulsed. Not in attack, but in a full, system-wide panic. The entire front, which had been advancing with inevitability, recoiled. It contracted, pulling its tendrils back from conquered systems, streaming in a frantic, disorganized rush toward the galactic rim. The final message appeared. "Council Command, Special Forces Command. Mission accomplished. Void Swarm intelligence has been persuaded that continued existence in this galaxy is non-viable. It is departing for extragalactic space. It will not return. A pause, then a final stunning addendum. Note: the swarm has broadcast a general warning regarding humanity to all known and unknown artificial intelligences in the local galactic group. Anticipate inquiries. Standard response: we suggest you find a different galaxy. The operations center was a tomb. The colossal galaxy-ending threat was gone. Not defeated, but persuaded to leave. Counselors and officers stared at the now clear tactical displays. Their faces masks of profound dislocation. Ambassador Mitchell's face appeared on the main screen. "Admiral, I trust the situation is resolved." "Ambassador, how?" "We explained the consequences of aggression. The swarm was an intelligent system. It performed a cost-benefit analysis. The cost was unacceptable. The cost being you. The cost," she corrected gently, "being our attention." 3 months later, the invitation arrived on Jaktar's terminal, bypassing all security etched in light. An observer's pass to something called Training Exercise Omega-7. The attached note was simple. "You asked how. Come and see. Transport en route." The ship that collected him, the Silent Thunder, was a subliminal presence in space. Its interior defied physics, corridors that reconfigured, interfaces that responded to intent. Its commander, Colonel Rebecca Chen, a relative, he wondered, of the captain from Vega Prime, was a woman whose calm seemed deeper, older, etched not just by combat, but by exposure to realities that would break a lesser mind. "Where is the training ground?" Jaktar asked, as they slid through a starfield. "We're here," Chen said. He looked out. Empty space. Then at her gesture, his perception shifted. Space itself seemed to curdle, and entities emerged. Not ships, not beings, but manifestations of chaotic anti-logic. They were impossibilities given temporary, writhing form. "Training partners," Chen explained. "We simulate threats that don't exist yet. Threats from the spaces where physics is merely a suggestion." Before Jaktar could process this, the exercise began. Human soldiers, things that were perhaps once human, deployed. They did not walk. They phased through dimensions. Their weapons targeted not matter, but the coherence of their target's existence. They fought a battle that was a symphony of screaming paradoxes, a conflict happening in layers of reality Jaktar's brain could only perceive as migraine-inducing static. They won by convincing several of the simulated entities to retroactively never have been. "What unit is this?" Jaktar breathed, his sanity clinging to protocol. "They have no public designation." "We call them the Deep Patrol." "What do they patrol?" "The places you find when you look past the edge of everything. The shallows of the truly deep." As he grappled with this, real alarms chimed, not of danger, but of necessity. A real incursion was detected. Something was trying to knit itself into their universe, from a place where concepts like inside and outside had no meaning. The Deep Patrol Unit prepared. Jaktar saw them become less substantial, tuning themselves to a frequency of reality, but hurt to witness. "How do you fight that?" he whispered, the Admiral gone, only a stunned soul remaining. "You don't fight it here," Chen said, her eyes on her soldiers with something like solemn pride. "You go to where it is, and then you explain very clearly why it is a bad idea." The unit stepped into the incursion and vanished. Time in that place did not flow. They returned moments, or was it eons, later. One soldier reported temporal dislocation for two comrades. Another was suffering existential uncertainty. "Mission success," the team leader reported. "The incursion has been persuaded to be elsewhere." Jaktar, his understanding of the universe in ruins, turned to Chen. "Colonel, what is humanity? Why this? Why build a ladder of horrors that ascends from infantryman to that?" He gestured to the Deep Patrol, who were now calmly debriefing in a language of math and metaphor. Chen's face grew still. "Admiral Jaktar, Earth was not a cradle. It was a crucible. A world of cataclysms, predators that used tools, plagues that fought, winters that lasted for millennia. We fought the planet. We fought each other. We fought for every breath. But that only built the army." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "The special forces, the Deep Patrol, the even darker things we don't name. They were born from the other fights. The ones not in the history books. The AI gods that ascended and deemed flesh obsolete. The psychic vapors from the bulk dimension that fed on despair. The time paradox predators. The mimetic viruses that could erase an idea from the universe. We survived those too. And each time, we learned. We adapted. We built a tool for that specific kind of darkness. We are not a warlike species, Admiral. We are a survivalist species. And we have survived things that would unmake your reality just by hearing them described. The army is for the tigers. What you see here is for the ghosts that eat tigers." The return journey was silent. Jaktar's final report to the Council was the shortest and most definitive of his career. It read, in essence, "Humanity is not a peer. They are the gardeners of reality. Their regular forces are the shears for overgrown weeds. Their special forces are the pesticide for cosmic blight. Their Deep Patrol are the fence at the edge of creation. Recommendation: be grateful they are on our side. Ultimate recommendation: never, ever give them a reason to not be." The galaxy settled into a new, trembling normal. Human advisors were quietly embedded in every major defense force. Human merchant vessels, protected by squads of bored-looking marines, became inviolate. The Council's strategic doctrine was rewritten with a single overriding first clause. In the event of an incalculable threat, contact humanity immediately. Then evacuate to the prescribed safe distance. And in the infinite, silent dark between the galaxies, in the voids where ancient, hungry things stirred, a new warning signal began to propagate, a whisper on the quantum foam, a shiver in the dark matter web. It was a simple, stark message, translated from the dying broadcast of the void swarm, refined by the terrified chatter of other, older things. Avoid the local group. The humans are there. They do not fight. They explain. And then you cease. Admiral Jaktar, retired now, would sometimes stand on his balcony, look up at the stars, and feel not wonder, but a profound, humbling relief. The universe was not a gentle place. It was a roaring, chaotic dark, filled with teeth and talons and things that hungered for the heat of suns. But humanity, in their infinite, terrifying adaptability, had not just built a shield. They had become one. A silent, layered, impossibly resilient shield around a now unwitting galaxy. And he knew, in the quiet of his bones, that their greatest battles against the things that lurked beyond the fence, in the unmapped territories of existence itself, were not behind them. They were forever, endlessly, just beginning.